history and the history of my province that I know I should know. And what I find interesting about this, guys, is that our province joined up with Canada at almost the exact same time. It's interesting for me, being a very proud, passionate Israel supporter. I'm not going to bring this into conversation too much right now, because it's kind of unrelated what I'm talking about here right now. But I'm, you know that I'm a proud, passionate Israel supporter. So I was thinking about it the other night. I thought, oh, quite interesting now, ironic or whatever, for someone like myself anyway, that my province joined up with Canada almost at the exact same time, became a province of the Canadian Federation. At the same time, almost the same time that the modern state of Israel was forming. I'm pretty sure it was 1947. I'm going to have to check that now next day and probably get back to you on the rights of it, sort of thing. So the nation was already pretty much formed. Long before that, I think it was 1867, I believe Canada formed. The first few provinces joined to form the Canadian Federation. And it started central Canada, and I think a couple of the provinces, 2 or 3 of the provinces in the maritime region joined up to form the Canadian Union or whatever. And it kind of just, over time, it just branched out, then to the rest of the continent, sort of thing. And guys, for those of you who don't know it, a lot of this actually was a reaction to what was going on down in the United States, okay? And so a quick little bit of interjection of Canadian American history here for what I know myself. So this is where we're getting into the history of the culture of our nations as it has existed now for the past 400 to 500 odd years or so. So as most people should know, I would imagine knows anything about North American history at all, the 2 nations that eventually formed into Canada and the United States were all originally colonies of Britain. So Britain and France. And so as the American Union was forming, and they took over a huge portion of the southern part of the continent to form the United States, I think almost from the very beginning, there was the hope, there was the intention that they could get the entire continent for themselves, and they would just work their way up and get more states built on and added to the states, working further on the north, sort of thing. But they reached a point where there was a pushback for some of the colonies that wanted to stay loyal with Britain and the British Empire and so on and so forth, didn't want to be a part of this sort of like American experiment or whatever sort of thing, want to stay loyal to the empire, and they resisted to being included, with this separation from the British Empire. And so so we had wars over that and all the rest of it, sort of thing. And so America only got so far. They never gained more territory beyond the the 51st parallel or whatever. It was supposed to be the dividing point between Canada. I think it's the 51st parallel. That became the dividing point between Canada and the United States. And so they lost that war, and so they just kind of retreated back into their own what they were forming and creating, sort of thing, and gave up on trying to push further north into North America. But I think the colonies up here, guys, took that as a warning sign that we needed to get our act together up here, sort of thing, and formalize better and come together better and try to form unions and all the rest of it, sort of thing, so we could minimize the risk of that happening again, sort of thing. And so I can't tell you every tiny little detail, guys, because I'm shamefully not up on it enough myself, sort of thing, as to how the extra provinces got added on, like Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, BC, and all the rest of it, and how we managed to work our way right across to the west coast of the continent. But we eventually managed to do so, and we solidified our spot here in the northern part of the continent. So then there was the ongoing issues of at what point, we would, because we were a dominion for the longest time, and we're still kind of connected to Britain with our governments and all the rest of it, sort of thing, you know. And it wasn't until I think around the mid '80s that we got our own constitution. We got our own Canadian constitution, and once we got our own constitution, we were almost completely split and separated from Britain, with our own legal system, our own constitution, our own laws that was purely Canadian in makeup and all the rest of it, sort of thing. Again, guys, I'm not completely up on this either. I don't know how much of it is still connected with British law systems and British ways of doing things and all the rest of it. Of course, the one thing we did retain was having the same head of state. So as most of you probably know, or you should know, I guess, if you know anything about North American history and British history and all the rest of that sort of thing, there are several nations around the world that were once former colonies of Britain that still have the British head of state, the British monarch, as their head of state as well, their monarch. So the King of England is also the King of Canada. So he's also our monarch and our head of state as well. And Australia and a whole score of other nations that I can't list them all off to you right now, that we still hold on to this institution as being our official head of state. Now, I think we have reached a point now, guys, where we should really probably reconsider that and reconsider the worth of keeping the monarchy here in Canada. And it's not even homegrown, it's not Canadian, it's nothing, it's got nothing to, does nothing to benefit the country anymore, to strengthen the country, to speak for the country, sort of thing. And particularly now with I'm getting a whole bunch of stuff in there very quickly, and guys, I'm very much aware that I'm talking them all a minute here, and I'm going to go easy. I've already gone over my 16 minutes now, I'm sure. With the way the monarchy has gone, especially since Queen Elizabeth, after passing away, and she's been gone on not a decade yet, I don't think, past 4, 5, 6, 7 years or so. She's been gone that long, I don't know. I don't think she's been gone that long, but anyway. The monarchy is proving how much of a useless institution that it actually is now. It's becoming abundantly apparent in the eyes of British people, and like any thinking Canadian should easily see it as well, sort of thing. So, we are getting an influx of people from other places, sort of thing, and it's not even so much this. Now, I've got to be so careful in what I'm saying here, guys, a lot with these issues, okay? Because, again, I still classify myself as a liberal, progressive type of individual in my overall philosophy, overall outlook of life, and so on and so forth. But where this wokeism as utterly, totally, completely infiltrated the left to an insane degree. Got something hanging out in front of my eyes there, guys. Here or something. It has utterly ruined, destroyed what the left has been traditionally about. So, I mean, the left, like as I was growing up myself throughout the 70s and throughout the 80s, it was about a number of the same sorts of things, I suppose, that it's about now, but it had much more of a balanced perspective, a much more of a common sense perspective, than it clearly seems to have now, sort of thing. So, I mean, the left here in Canada, a progressive liberalism here in Canada, yes, it always has been about inclusion. Embracing other people, embracing other cultures and ways of life and all this sort of stuff, to add to what we call here the Canadian mosaic, guys, the Canadian mosaic. Now, I'm going to have to do a whole bunch of videos on this because I have a unique perspective on this, guys, that I think is a very useful and a very important perspective that I'm not hearing anybody else talk about when it talks about the whole multicultural issues facing us currently, sort of thing. But we had this notion here in Canada. I don't know if they had it in Britain the same way or if they have it down in the States the same way, because the United States has always been called a melting pot. Here in Canada, from the early to roughly mid-80s onwards, sort of thing, we took a slightly different approach, and we classified ourselves as being more of a mosaic. Like I have to get a dictionary definition of what a mosaic means. But it's not so much that the cultures of other places come to Canada and meld into one overall culture, one kind of like blended culture or whatever, although there's a usefulness to that as well, sort of thing, to a certain degree. But it was that they could come here and still celebrate their individuality, their diversity, and all the rest of it. But it was supposed to add on to, not supplant, guys, not supplant what already exists there, sort of thing, but to add on to what we had already established here in Canada. And I'm not hearing anybody talking about multiculturalism in that framework right now. So what has clearly been happening in recent years, clearly, absolutely, if anybody's got always in their heads and a functioning brain, they can clearly see what's been happening over the past less than 5 years or so, and in particular, all throughout the Western world, is that you have certain cultures and groups and stuff, but one in particular that is moving into every friggin' Western nation on earth, a Judeo-Christian Western nation, and they're not assimilating and they're not adding on to, they are supplanting. They are taking their religious belief system and their cultural framework and everything to do with what they're about, which has got next to nothing to do with what Western society traditionally has been about, and they're trying to supplant their religious system, their religious ideology, their political system, and all the rest of it, supplant ours with theirs. And that is not at all what multiculturalism is about. So I want to clarify that here right now, because I'm blown away that there's not a single solitary other person out there that I've seen. I've watched a number of videos now over the past little while, past year or so in particular, people talking about multiculturalism and how it's failing and all the rest of it, but it's never spoken about in this kind of framework sort of thing. So it's failing only in the sense that we are not properly defining what multiculturalism should be about, sort of thing, you know. So here in Canada, I think, because we talked a lot about, I remember this as I was growing up, guys, you know, throughout the early to mid 80s sort of thing, you know, what is Canada about? What you know, how do we define ourselves? How do we classify our character and our makeup as we're moving into the 20th century and moving toward the end of the 20th century and so on and so forth? How do we define ourselves? How do we redefine ourselves, you know, as we are changing and growing and evolving sort of thing? We were having these conversations back in the 80s, guys, you know. And I remember Justin's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, because he was the Prime Minister of this nation when I was still a kid, and for most of my formative years as I was growing up, he was Prime Minister of the nation, and his influence was pretty strong over a lot of people in this country, you know, because he sort of laid the framework, you know, classified what Canada should be about in the modern era, and most of us thought it was great ideas, great concepts and so on, and went along, and I still do, you know. And so he tried to define for most Canadians what he felt multiculturalism was about. And I probably had other influences and all the rest of it. And I kept hearing over and over and over, guys, the Canadian mosaic, the Canadian mosaic, the Canadian mosaic. Not the Canadian melting pot, anything like that, the Canadian mosaic, as it related to the overall structure of multiculturalism in this nation. So if you have one culture that's coming in and trying to supplant everything else in the nation, you don't have your mosaic. Okay, you have one culture that is trying to destroy everything else that already exists, and that is not what our vision, our version of multiculturalism was ever meant to be about, sort of thing. Okay, so I want you to get that clear in your minds right now. No one has defined it this way so far, and I can still support official multiculturalism, at least here in this country anyway, by explaining it in those terms. And I can still be vehemently against what this one culture and this one religion is trying, and we all know what that religion is. I don't have to spell it out. We all know what it is, which one it is. what it's clearly trying to do here right now, what it's trying to do here in Canada, what it's trying to do in the United States, what it's trying to do all throughout Europe, what it has been doing in Britain now for I'm assuming better part 20 odd years, unfortunately, and completely ruining that nation, because it's destroying everything that existed before. Britain was already a largely multicultural society, but a similar kind of framework here, guys. No one in Britain had any desire to see their traditional British values wiped off the face of the earth, and their culture and all the rest of it wiped off the face of the earth, because they were bringing in all these other people from other places, sort of thing. That was never the original idea, the original intention of multiculturalism when it was initially being envisioned, sort of thing. So that has been really corrupted and really twisted and really kind of like misunderstood now in all the conversations about it on both left and right. I haven't seen a liberal left-wing person yet describe it sensibly along those lines, so that a right-wing person could be comfortable with it, sort of thing, and be accepting of it. Because to be quite frank with you guys, it's not even happening anyway. It's not playing out the way it's supposed to be playing out, you know. So as we enter into our Canada Day celebrations, I'm going to check my timer now, guys. I won't have a clue up right now. This is what I do, half an hour and as quick as that. As we enter into our this is 34. Okay, I think I'm going to be 270 minutes long here now with this here, guys, so I'm going to have the clue up right now. So as we enter into our celebrations now throughout today and throughout tomorrow, guys, I'm going to see if I can get this thing posted sometime tonight now, so maybe I can get some views tomorrow and all the rest of it. As Canadians are celebrating our birthday tomorrow, I think it's either the 157 or 105. I'm sorry, my Canadian brothers and sisters, it's shameful that I don't know this. It's either that or 158 odd years. I'll know tomorrow because I'll check it out tonight. But anyway, as we celebrate our birthday tomorrow, let's think about all this sort of stuff, guys. Don't make it just a one-day celebration where you just have a bit of fun and, oh, happy Canada Day and blah, blah, blah. Think what it's all about, guys. Think about what's going on in our nation right now. Think about what it means to be Canadian, how we define Canadian identity, what we want to accept in our nation, what we feel that we rightfully cannot accept, and what direction we want to take our nation into as we move ahead into the future, sort of thing. So Canada being like 150 odd years old, 157, 158, like I said, you know, it's like we're still a baby nation, guys, a baby nation. When you think about the nations and the cultures of the world that are hundreds and hundreds of years old, some well over 1,000 years old, and you take